Horror Stories in York Part 9. 25th of March 1586, the pressing to death of a saint. Margaret Clitheroe was a Catholic at a time when it was illegal to be so in a Protestant England. She'd already been arrested and imprisoned many times before for non-attendance of the Protestant Mass. But this didn't deter the 30-year-old Margaret, who at the house of her husband John and her 3 children began to hold in secret Catholic Masses. She had also begun to harbour the Catholic priests. One day, the authorities decided they would search Margaret's house after they received a tip-off that Margaret was doing illegal activities. There in the floorboards, they discovered vestments and chalices, and in the wall was the crevice they deemed to be the priest's hidey hole. Margaret was arrested and brought to trial at the Guildhall. There, she refused to plead guilty or not guilty to the charge of harbouring a Catholic priest. As such, she was sentenced to peine forte dieu, the strong and enduring pain. She was to be pressed to death. She was brought here to Ouse Bridge on the 25th of March, and wearing a light smock was laid on the ground. A sharp rock was placed at the base of her spine, and on her chest was laid a heavy wooden door. It was actually her own front door. Guards then had to lift up great big heavy stones and place them on the door on Margaret's chest. But after a time, Margaret said nothing. She refused to cry out in pain, which frightened the guards so much that they refused to continue the work. 2 passing vagrants were plucked from the crowd and paid to continue the work. With a weight of almost 800 pounds on her chest, Margaret finally looked up to the sky and cried out, "Jesus, Jesus, have mercy on me." The weight had then crushed her ribcage, her back had broken, and Margaret exhaled for the final time. It took her 15 minutes to die, and 2 lives were lost that day, as Margaret had been with child. Her body was then dumped in a ditch and later rescued by one of Margaret's supporters, who had noticed that the body hadn't started to decay in the usual fashion, but she was buried in secret at nearby Hazelwood Castle. Upon hearing on the news of Margaret's death, Queen Elizabeth I was outraged that a woman had suffered this fate. She wrote to the citizens of York, condemning the execution, and gave them a hefty fine, which they were grovelling for years later. Just before she was buried, her right hand was taken from her body. It remains a relic and can still be seen today at the Bar Convent Museum just on the outskirts of Micklegate Bar. In 1970, Pope John Paul II declared that she was now a saint and gave her the name the Pearl of York.